Oh, thanks. All right, welcome. We're glad everyone could join us today. This event is sponsored by the Political Science Club at Mid-Valley Campus. If you have not joined the Political Science Club, you are not required to be a political science major to join in, but we are one of the most active clubs on campus, and we do lots of fun things. So keep an eye out for our meetings and all of our special events that we do. And of course, if you're in any of my classes, you don't hear me shut up about it anyway. So you'll continue to hear that sort of thing. But I'm glad that everybody was able to make it. We have a very special guest today who is going to be speaking to us mostly about the upcoming constitutional amendments election. We are early voting, as most of you should know, has already started for this election. This is where we, the people of Texas, get to actually decide what goes into our state constitution. So what was interesting was I made lots of phone calls around to try to get someone to come in and, that has expertise on this matter. And everybody said, well, you should get Representative Martinez to come speak. So we are very privileged to have Representative Martinez come to speak with us today. He's going to tell us all about, we've got 7 constitutional amendments that are being proposed that are going to be on the, that are on the ballot now. The election itself, election day, is just under 2 weeks. Plus we have some local elections too. And Representative Martinez might address a couple of other fun electoral things that are going on right now too in Texas politics. So without any further ado, let's give a warm STC welcome to Representative Armando Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Always a pleasure to be here with you all. Just a little information about myself and a little history. I'm born and raised here in Weslaco, graduated from Weslaco High School, and graduated in '98 from University of Texas Pan American, which is now UTRGV. So there has been so much expansion and things that we have done over the years. You know, back in the days when I was in college, you know, we've always heard about a medical school and wanting to have a medical school. And after being elected in 2004 into the Texas legislature, which is about 14 years now, right? Or 13 years, it's truly been eye-opening to where we were able to merge the 2 universities, Pan American and Brownsville, and we came up with UTRGV, and now we have a medical school here in the Rio Grande Valley. So a lot of people ask me, what is your definition of success? And I said, well, my definition of success is opportunity, and we need to give our students opportunities in order for them to become you know, engaged in society and become whatever they want to be in a particular profession that they're interested in. So now you have the ability of becoming a physician, a doctor here in the Rio Grande Valley with our own medical school, and we're looking forward, and I've been filing for the past few sessions legislation to create a law school here in the Rio Grande Valley, because the closest one we have is in San Antonio. So now you're going to have an opportunity to just stay here in the valley and pick a profession that interests you, and then you can do that in life. So a lot of very interesting things. You know, elected in 2004, I've been there 7 terms. I'm the vice chair of transportation, which we oversee all the infrastructure and transportation projects across the state of Texas. I've also sat on appropriations, which is the largest committee that approves the budget for the state of Texas. So many things and experience that I've gone through, it's just been tremendous. But, you know, we have some important things that are happening this week and next week, which is early voting. And have any of you all gone out to vote? Anybody here? Just raise your hand if you've gone out to vote. Not yet? Okay. Tomorrow. Okay, good, because we're going to have some information on the constitutional amendments that we're doing. And it's extremely important, ladies and gentlemen, to get out and vote. Now, a lot of people say, my vote doesn't matter. You know, it's not going to make a difference. That person's going to win, or that person is going to win, and it's not going to make a difference. Well, that is not true. You know, we've had members of the House of Representatives that have won elections by 4 votes. And in 2009, the Democrats, we could have actually taken control of the Texas House if we would have won 1 seat in Dallas, and we lost that by 10 votes. So every vote matters. You know, when people tell me, Chihuahuas, you're going to win anyway, that's not the right idea. And plus, you know, your vote is extremely, extremely important, not just for the person that's running, but to be a voice for yourself, because you elect the government that represents you. So right now, we've heard so much about the presidential election, right? And how the popular vote didn't matter. Well, the popular vote did matter, even though we don't elect the president on the popular vote. And the reason for that is we use an electoral college. And how does that happen? Does anybody have an idea? Can you, anybody just kind of raise your hand if you have an idea of how that works? I'm going to explain it to you. So, of course you do, Mr. Green. But, so usually, by winning the popular vote in the state, the one that has the majority votes in the states wins the electoral college. And the reason it was set up that way is because you don't want somebody in the largest states like Texas that has a population of 28 million, or California that has a very large population, being the only states electing your president all the time. If that were the case, then a lot of our presidents would have won with a popular vote out of those states, and you wouldn't elect a president out of any other state, and they would possibly not even have a say in it. So it's very important that we also consider that. And that's why the Electoral College was set up. So by winning the state, you win those electoral votes, and that's why the popular vote isn't what elects your president. So there's a reason behind that madness, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get into some of these constitutional amendments that you're going to be seeing when you go to the ballot box. And they're... the constitutional amendments are done by us in the legislature, and what it is we come up with a bill, and that bill is proposed, and then we have to do what's called an HJR, which is a joint resolution, to where that is passed by the House, and you need 100 votes to pass it, okay? So that then goes to the Senate, and they also have to pass it with a supermajority, and then once that is passed, then the voters elect to make that change on our Constitution, on our Texas Constitution. So us as a legislator, we don't make the changes in the Constitution. It has to come out, and the majority of the public have to support that and vote for it. So Amendment number 1, the Constitutional Amendment number 1, when you go to a ballot box, you're going to see a small little, blurb of what it says, and it's partially disabled vet tax exemption for partially donated homes. And everybody's saying, well, what in the world is that? Well, let me tell you what it means. This would authorize a property tax exemption for certain partially disabled veterans. Basically what it's doing, the tax exemption is equal to the percentage of disability of that disabled veteran. And they're doing it towards a home that's donated by charity. So if you have a veteran that is 60% disabled, for example, and they were donated a home, they would get a home exemption of 60%, okay? A tax exemption of 60%. That's what it's doing. That's the nuts and bolts, okay, of what it's doing. So that veteran, depending on the percentage of disability that they are approved by or that they are given, that's the percentage of a tax exemption that they would receive on their home. And that is a big deal for a lot of people, especially on a fixed income. And our veterans. So Amendment number 2, Constitutional Amendment number 2, is on home equity loans. And if a lot of you that have parents or grandparents that have had homes, and sometimes they'll borrow against their home in order to expand it or to build a garage or to do home improvements, they get what's called a home equity loan. And what they do is the equity that's that they have accrued in their home, they will use that, get a loan towards it, and use that amount of money in order to build the home. Well, laws have not been changed in over 20 years for this, and this would ease some of the restrictions against home equity in Texas, and it makes it a lot easier for them to get a home equity loan. Now, some people say that with these types of changes, it's going to hurt a lot of people. But, and it lowers the cap on fees from 2 to 3%, and it allows home equity loan to be financed and refinanced. So mainly, Proposition 2 is on home equity loans, and all it's doing is changing the type of restrictions that we have and the laws that have been in place for over 20 years. So that is, it's up to you on how you want to vote with that, on lessening restrictions. I'm probably going to support something like that. I'm going to support, of course, the Amendment number 1 and Amendment number 2. Now, Amendment number 3, it's the governor appointee limitation. So basically what happens is now the governor of Texas can appoint a person to a committee. So you have a certain committee, they appoint them, and they all have terms, right? So let's say it's a 2-year term that they're sitting on that committee. A lot of times what happens is when that person's term comes up after the 2 years, well, they aren't replaced. So that individual stays there, and he continues to serve without getting reappointed. And he just remains in that seat, and nobody else has a chance to come in. So what this constitutional amendment does is it says, okay, if Armando Martinez is appointed to a certain committee by the governor, and his term comes up after 2 years, and he has, they haven't reappointed a new person in his position, by the next legislative session, okay, when that comes up, it is stopped, and somebody else is automatically reappointed to that seat. So they cannot continue to serve 4, 5, 6, 7 years without being reappointed. So that term stops. It's mainly giving a limitation on the amount of time a person can serve and without being reappointed. That's all it's doing, to fill that vacancy again. So it's not anything huge, but it's something that needed to be placed in the Constitution in order to make those changes. So extremely, I mean, it doesn't hurt anybody. It just makes sure that we put a limitation on the term that somebody can serve after being appointed. Amendment number 4 is something that is extremely important and that we need to think about. You know, we have a balance of power here to make sure the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, right? So if there's certain laws that affect people in a way that may be negative, you have the courts. They can actually go in, you file a lawsuit, and they can put a stop to it. And I'm going to touch on that right now because amendment number 4 is challenging our state laws in court, okay? So this would require a court to notify the state attorney general of any constitutional challenges to state laws and delay a decision on it by up to 45 days. Now, that is something I don't support, and I'm going to tell you why. You know, we've heard a lot about one of our laws right now in place, Senate Bill 4, or we've heard about the voter ID laws. And Texas had one of the most restrictive voter ID laws in the nation, okay? And that was passed back in 2011. And the reason I say the most restrictive because it pretty much oppressed a lot of the minorities, a lot of the minorities on their right to vote. Because we gave them options of, hey, not only a driver's license, but if you have a water bill, if you have a government ID, if you have a military ID, you should be able to utilize that as a form of identification when you go and vote. Because if I can use my government ID to get on a plane, then I surely can use that to go and vote. And besides, voting is a right, okay? Voting is a right. And you shouldn't have to pay for a driver's license if you're going to use that to vote, right? Driving is a privilege, voting is a right. So if I'm going to use my driver's license to go and vote, it should be free. Anyway, but with that in mind, what happened is there was so many restrictions put in place to where, let's say, for example, you have an elderly individual in a nursing home. Well, they have to go get an ID. So how are you going to get that person from the nursing home down to the DMV to get a driver's license or to get an ID? It's going to be very hard. So what happens to that person? They're unable to vote. Okay? They are unable to vote. That's voter restriction at its finest. Now let me tell you something else. If you have my grandmother, my grandfather that have lived here forever, and now they have to go get an ID instead of their own voter registration card to go and vote. Well, if you go get an ID, you're going to need certain documents. You're going to need a birth certificate, right, to show. You're going to need a water bill, a light bill, certain documents. Well, in order for you to get a birth certificate, you have to go pay for that document wherever you go. So to me, anytime you have to pay to go get a document in order for you to vote, that is essentially a poll tax. So that is saying now this person has to go and pay for documents in order for them to get an ID to have to vote. So a lot of people were saying, you know what, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go and take the time to go sit down there and go get a birth certificate. And for a lot of people that have been here, that are in their 60s, 70s, maybe their 80s, it's very difficult for them to go and get a birth certificate and obtain that in order to get an ID. So now those people would be unable to vote. So if you look at that, that's the restriction that we're talking about, and that is why the courts, we filed a lawsuit through the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, and we said, wait a second, this is disenfranchising our voters, this is oppressing our minorities, and this is restricting people's right to vote. So we are filing a lawsuit on that to where we are not going to implement this law until the courts decide. So amendment number 4, in my opinion, now you all make your own opinion, is a bad amendment. And it's something that I'm not going to support because I think our courts are in place to protect us from laws that can essentially restrict us from voting or restrict, or cause some type of legislation that would have some racial profiling that will affect us. So I think those are in place for a reason, and I don't think we need to make any changes constitutionally to allow our AG or our Attorney General to delay that process any longer. So that's amendment number 4. It's just allowing them to delay decision in a court for 45 days, which I don't think is right. Amendment number 5, very, very simple amendment, okay? Right now you have a lot of your professional teams who sell raffle tickets, and they will give those proceeds to charitable organizations, depending on the organization, whether it's United Way or other charitable organizations to help people. What this does, it just expands that definition and adds minor league teams. So now that you see that we have a minor league hockey team here, we have a minor league basketball team in the Vipers, you have a minor, maybe an arena football league, they could sell, this just allows them to sell those raffle tickets and use those proceeds and donate them to charitable organizations, whether it's to help clothe people or for hurricane relief or whatever it may be. It just allows them to do that. So amendment number 5 is a very, easy worded type of amendment. Doesn't really do anything other than allowing minor league teams now to donate charitable contributions through raffles to areas, to different sites and organizations. Amendment number 6 is actually another tax exemption. Now this one is for first responders, and we all know that our first responders, our firefighters, our police officers, our EMS workers are the ones that are, always in the line of duty, just like our personnel in the military that go out there and fight for us. But so what this does, this is a tax exemption for the spouse, the surviving spouse of a first responder who is killed in the line of duty. Okay, but as long as that surviving spouse does not get remarried, it is a portion of tax exemption for that surviving spouse. So in other words, if I am a police officer, which, by the way, I'm a firefighter and a paramedic, and I was a flight medic with Valley Air Care for many years, to where we would fly a lot of sick and injured patients on the helicopters and on the planes, from accidents or from hospitals, depending on what the situation was. If one of us were to get killed while we are out there on the field, like when I was flying one of those patients, which now, I'm not, right? But at that time, in the line of duty, then my wife, if I were married, my wife would receive a tax exemption until she gets remarried. So that's all it's doing. So if you are the surviving spouse of a first responder, police officer, firefighter, EMS personnel that is killed in the line of duty, then the surviving spouse would receive a tax exemption. And it would have to be at market value. So whatever your residence is at market value, that's where you would, get your tax exemption. And of course, the last one, amendment number 7, it would allow banks and other financial institutions to promote activities such as raffles and encourage savings. So members would be entered into the raffle if they save above a certain amount of money. So it's mainly a kind of like a cost savings or an incentive. So the savings would saving incentives such as a savings promotion or raffle. It would offer cash prizes on a needed basis to Texas households, mainly saying if you are able to save this amount of money, we're going to enter you in a raffle, and if you win that raffle, you would make money. It's trying to encourage savings for people that are in the savings and the banking and have accounts. So mainly your credit unions and things of that nature. So that's what it's focusing on, mainly on making sure people are saving money, and if it's an incentive, so if you're saving money, then you're entered into a raffle in your way of saving money or winning some money in cash prizes. Now, some people say that's an expansion of gambling in a way, which, I beg to differ. I think there's, other issues that are part of that, but it just tries to encourage savings through incentives through the banking. So real quick, a quick recap of what we just spoke about. The amendment number 1 is on the partially disabled veteran, right? So that is talking about the percentage of disability that they have. Okay, that's the tax exemption that they would receive if they would receive a charitable donation of a residence. The second one is the home equity loans, basically changing a law that is 20 years old and, loosening a lot of the restrictions that have currently been in place. Amendment number 3 is governor appointments, which is, if they serve their term, that way they don't stay there for an additional 5 or 6 years without a new appointee being set to that position. Amendment number 4 that we talked about, and that's the challenging of state laws in court. And that's the one I tell you that I have a major issue with, because we want to make sure that people aren't disenfranchised and our courts are able to rule on certain laws that affect people negatively. We also have the amendment number 5, which is a charitable sports raffle. That's the one where now minor league teams can go ahead and have raffles and donate that money to charity. Amendment number 6 is the first responder surviving spouse tax exemption. So that's the one that, of course, the wife or the surviving spouse, the husband of that first responder, will receive a tax exemption all the way up until, if they were to get remarried, then that exemption would stop. And, of course, the last one is the bank and credit union lotteries, which is an incentive towards savings of money. So that's a quick recap of the 7 constitutional amendments. I know for sure number 4 is the one I am going to vote against, but you all, make your own determination of how you're going to vote on that. And extremely important, ladies and gentlemen, that you get out and vote and that your voice is heard. And how many of you all are registered to vote here today? Okay. Well, let me give you a little fun fact real quick. Out of I represent the area I represent is Progreso, Mercedes, Westlaco, Donna, Alamo, and San Juan. That's my area. Okay. I represent a population of about 180,000 people in my district, maybe a little more. So, hey, Selma. See her at the gym every morning. So out of those 180,000 people that I represent, 63,000 people are registered to vote. Okay? Out of 180,000 people, 63,000 are registered to vote. Out of those 63,000 people that are registered to vote, guess how many voted in the last general election? Well, let me just give you a number. 15,000 people. That's pretty sad. When I went to Turkey, I went to visit Turkey, and about 88% of their population vote. 88%. And so we have something here that is extremely important for us. We have a right that we should use, and we should be proud to use it. So it's very, very important. If you're not registered, go and get registered to vote. Even though you may think that your voice isn't heard, I mean, we hear it every day, and I wish we could take the phone away from our president, right? But we hear it every single day about what's going on and the atrocities that we're hearing and how people are affected day in, day out But the only way we can make a change is by getting out there and exercising our vote, our right to vote. Now, I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm just asking you to go vote. As long as you vote, that is what is important. Unless I'm on the ballot and you see my name, will of course say I'm voting for Mando, right? Armando Martinez. Ando con Mando. Always remember that. But no, aside from that, extremely important. It doesn't matter who you vote for as long as you go out and you exercise your right to vote. And stay engaged in the process. Stay extremely engaged in the process so that you know exactly what is going on in your communities and in your area to where you can make a change. So our doors are always open. Our office is right here across from the Weslaco High School on Pike. You'll see it. It's a brown stucco building. If you all ever want to go by and just visit and talk to us about some issues that may be concerning you, our doors are open and you're welcome to. Paco Sanchez is my legislative director. He's sitting right up there. Now, a little story about Paco. Paco was a valedictorian in Donna Redskins. Okay, and he graduated, and in 2007, he was my intern up in Austin. He went to the University of Texas in Austin. He graduated from UT, and he went to law school at the University of Houston. And when he left law school, I guess he's a glutton for punishment, but he wanted to come back and work at the office. So he is our counsel and our legislative director, so he writes the legislation for us and does a lot of the research. So those are the kinds of things that you all can accomplish through educating yourselves and getting engaged in the system, and now Paco is part of that. So I ask you to please do that, get involved, and if we can help you at any time, don't hesitate to ask. And I think we're going to open it up for questions, Mr. Green.
Yeah.
And thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Martinez.
Hope it wasn't too boring.
Okay, before we open for questions, I'd like to ask Representative Martinez to talk about one more thing, especially for our Texas government students, where we're studying the legislature right now. And that is the surprise announcement this week that our Speaker of the House is not running for re-election. And that's a pretty big deal. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Extremely big deal. So our Speaker of the House, and let me tell you how the makeup is. In the state of Texas, you have your governor that runs statewide. You have a lot of statewide seats, like your land commissioner, your ag commissioner that runs statewide, your attorney general that runs statewide, your lieutenant governor, who is the president of the Senate, who runs statewide. But in the House of Representatives, there's 150 members, and we're all divided by districts. Like I told you earlier, our districts are about 180,000 in population, and my district is 39. Out of the 150 members, we select one person to be the Speaker of the Texas House. And that individual right now is Joe Strauss. He's a Republican out of San Antonio. And you're probably thinking, okay, you're a Democrat, and why are you choosing a Republican? Well, number one, the Republicans are the majority. Right now there's 95 Republicans and there's 55 Democrats. And we select who we want to be our Speaker and who we want to lead. We may not agree philosophically a lot with their ideas or what their types of legislation are, and of course, you know, we're very vocal about it, and it's different ideas at times, but we have to select somebody that we think is going to run the House moderately and make the right decisions to where it affects the people of Texas positively. So Joe Strauss was elected Speaker back in 2009, and we've had him as our Speaker since. Now, he and I are very, very good friends. You know, we text quite frequently. And yesterday was quite a big shock because our Speaker announced that he's not going to run for re-election. And I don't only mean re-election for the Texas House as a Speaker, I mean re-election period. He's retiring from the Texas legislature. So now that kind of blows everything up and everybody's running and trying to say, okay, who is going to be our next Speaker? Now you have a lot of people coming out with, you know, your super, ultra conservative ideas, kind of like the ideas of people that are disenfranchising voters and wanting voter restriction and passing SB4 laws that is now the Show Me Your Papers law here in the state of Texas, where they can pull you over and pretty much racially profile you and ask you if you're an American citizen. You may say, hey, you know what, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, because when you give the police a right to do that, you know, it surely does bother me, because I know I am, and I don't want anybody asking me. But anyway, so now that totally changes the whole dynamics of the legislature, and now we have to make another selection of somebody who's going to be able to make the right decisions for the people of Texas. So the good thing is we have 2018, the November election, for you all to go out and vote, and make sure you vote. Well, I'm not going to say, make sure you vote Democrat. No, make sure you guys get out and vote, because that is going to determine who our governor is, who our lieutenant governor is, who our attorney general is. So extremely important. And let me tell you, if a lot of people, if people here in the Valley would vote, if we could have an 80% voter turnout, we control the elections in Texas. Do you know that? We do. The Rio Grande Valley. You're saying, well, why? Well, because if you kind of put a pencil to it, and we have a population of about 1.3 million, 80% of that would decide who our next governor is, who our next lieutenant governor is, and our AG. So with that in mind, throughout the state of Texas, if we can change the demographics in the Texas House as well, then we can elect a new speaker. So very, very important things that are going on, and yeah, taken by surprise totally yesterday.
Great, thank you for sharing on that. Okay, any questions that you'd like to ask Representative Martinez, either about the constitutional amendments, Speaker of the House, anything to do with Texas politics, who he's voting for in the local election? No, don't ask him that, not in public. Any questions? Y'all are so smart. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Back here. And we'll repeat it when you say it.
If I had to place bets right now, well, there is one name that came out yesterday, and that's John Zerwas. Dr. Zerwas, he's actually an anesthesiologist. Dr. Zerwas is a good friend. He's also the chair of appropriations. I've served with him for many terms, and if I could choose right now, and he was the name out there, I would probably support him. But you see, the only thing with that is that's today. But if it depends on the elections in 2018 and the November elections, and see who gets elected and who loses their seat, because you also have people that are announcing that they're not going to run for re-election. So it's a little hard to determine, but if it were today and I had to make a selection, he would definitely be one of the names that I would select. Good question.
Other questions? Right here? Go ahead. Yeah.
Am I planning on running for speaker? Actually, that's a good question, because yesterday we did have the paperwork so we could file for Speaker of the Texas House. The only thing is that I'm a Democrat and there's only 55 of us. But depending on the November election, if we have a change and we can pick up some more seats, then you may see my name coming out for Texas Speaker of the House. So yes, good question. Thank you.
What are the voter laws right now as far as to go out and vote? I know you mentioned ID and water bills. What are the documents?
Right now that
So the question is, what are the laws, the voter ID laws and so forth right now in the state of Texas?
In the state of Texas, and I would encourage you all to look on the Secretary of State's website on the voter ID laws. There was a lot of those restrictions that were struck down recently by the courts. So I believe a water bill will be one of the ones that you can utilize, an ID. Even if your ID is expired, I believe you can use an ID. Currently, those are some of the things that you can use. Or fill out a form. You can fill out a form there as to, hey, look, I don't have an ID, but this is the reason, and I am so-and-so, and I'm presenting you with a light bill, a water bill, or something of that nature. So that's actually something that can be utilized at this time. But I would encourage you all to please look on the Secretary of State website so that if you are going to go vote, you are prepared. And if you do have an ID, take it with you.
Excellent. Other questions? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Yes. Do you have to be registered to vote in this election?
Yes, you do have to be registered to vote in this election. And it's very simple. You can pull the form off online, you can fill it out, and you can mail it either to the elections office here in Hidalgo County. You just put your address on there. But yes, you do have to be registered to vote. So, and if you're not, and it's too late to vote in this election, but you can still get registered today, and you can vote in the next elections coming up, because we do have a primary coming up. And the reason I say primaries is in March you have the Democratic primary, Democratic and Republican primary. And the way I always say this is, in March, the primaries are like your championship game, NFC and the AFC championship game. And then in November, your general election, that's kind of like having your Super Bowl, right? So you have Democrat versus Republican. So that's mainly what it is. So yes, but if you're not registered to vote, ladies and gentlemen, please go register as soon as possible so that you can turn in and vote in the next upcoming election in March.
And I believe that Student Services has deputy registrars, official deputy registrars, so you can actually go over there and they'll help you get registered to vote too.
And I want to say we have voter registration cards at our office. So as well, if you can't get them here, stop by our office and we'll help you out as well.
Other questions?
With voter fraud in the state of Texas or in general, that's always coming up in every election nowadays. In your opinion, what would be your best solution for voter fraud? Because you're mentioning about Texas having the highest restrictions and stuff like that. So at what point would you recommend, or what would be the balance to all of that?
Now, and that's a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. You know, in talking about voter fraud, and people say, man, even dead people vote. Well, I never met a dead person that's voted for me. That's a joke, guys. You can laugh. No, okay. So, but that is a very good question. Did you know that when we were doing the voter ID law, there was 0 instances of people that were actually voting who weren't who they said they were, okay? And I think they convicted 1, and the guy was a Republican, and it was out of North Texas. The problem that we have with voter fraud is on the mail-in ballots. That is where you have the voter fraud problem. It's not people physically going to vote, it's the mail-in ballot. And you may see your grandparents or uncles, you know, your tias that may receive that ballot in the mail, and then you'll have somebody coming over, and we call those harvesters, and they go in there and, no, this is how we're gonna vote, and they'll just take the ballot from them, and they'll sign the ballot. That is something that we addressed this past session in regard to voter fraud, and it is the mail-in ballot. So there are some more restrictions that we did in regard to mail-in ballots and voter fraud. So very good question. Yes.
Good question. You had your hand back here? Mm-hmm. How often do you have
Forever.
to renew? Yeah.
Forever. The only thing you have to do is if you're going to change an address, let's say you move somewhere else, and you want to vote. Let's say you're registered in Weslaco, and you end up moving to McAllen, and you want to vote in McAllen. All you have to do is notify them of the change of address, and you can vote. But it's in perpetuity, forever.
As long as you keep voting.
As long as you keep voting.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'll get kicked off if you don't vote for a while.
And trust me, I have that little deal through the Texas Democratic Party that I look up names. You know, people say, hey, I voted for you. Really? And then you look them up and, they haven't voted. Oh, wow, okay. Hey, well, thanks for your vote, man. You know. But, yeah, so when you're registered to vote, you know, it'll come out and it'll tell you how many times you voted and in what election you voted. And then it'll also let the individual know if you voted in the Democratic primary or in the Republican primary.
Right here.
Yes, for 100% disabled, yes, we do have tax exemption for the 100% disabled. The problem was that they wanted to do a reduction in the homestead exemption for those that had some partial disability. So that's why this one was put in effect. No, it doesn't have to be more than 50%. Yeah, so if they were given a charitable home, just the percentage of their disability is what they receive on their tax exemption. There is some language already in the law on your own homestead that would address that as well.
Okay, other questions?
Good question, by the way.
Anyone? Anyone going once? Yes. So on Amendment 6, is it only for the people that are killed in the line of duty? And, or if they get cancer or something, would they qualify? Okay.
Right. Unfortunately, that one is just specific to those killed in the line of duty. So if they're responding to a call and they're killed, that is. But I have filed legislation, being a firefighter myself, on people that do have cancer or have had cancer during the time of their, while they're in the fire service, and we've been pushing that almost every session. So we are addressing that issue. But very good question. But unfortunately, it's only for those that have died in the line of duty.
Other questions? Excellent questions. Okay, well, thank you very much, and let's give another warm thank
you
you
all.
to Representative Martinez for coming today.
And you all will probably always see my signs out there, District 39, Ando con Armando Martinez, State Representative. So thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless Texas.